Hi GQ, I'm Jaafar Jackson, and I'm here to talk about how I prepared for the role of Michael Jackson.
There are moments in history when the line between legend and reality becomes so thin that nobody can tell where one ends and the other begins. For decades, the world believed that the story had already been written. The records had been broken. The stages had gone dark. The headlines had faded into history. Yet the impact never disappeared. His music continued playing in homes, cars, stadiums, and arenas across every continent. New generations who were not even born during the height of his fame discovered his performances and reacted with the same disbelief that audiences felt decades earlier. To millions of people around the world, Michael Jackson was not simply an entertainer. He was a symbol of what seemed impossible, a performer whose influence crossed language, culture, age, and time itself. Then something unexpected happened. A new name began appearing in conversations around the entertainment industry, a name that carried enormous weight long before the public truly noticed it. That name was, at first many people dismissed the comparisons. After all, nobody could replace Michael Jackson. Nobody could become the next king of pop. Nobody could recreate a phenomenon that happened only once in human history. But the more images emerged from the upcoming biopic, the more interviews appeared, the more behind-the-scenes stories leaked from the production, the harder it became for people to ignore what they were seeing. Some fans stayed at photographs and felt chills. Others watched brief clips and questioned whether they were looking at Michael himself. Suddenly, a question nobody expected returned to the center of popular culture. Could a member of the Jackson family somehow capture the spirit of the most famous entertainer who ever lived? For Jaafar Jackson, that question was never simple. Long before cameras rolled, he understood the challenge waiting for him. He knew that portraying Michael Jackson was unlike portraying any other historical figure. Every movement would be scrutinized. Every expression would be analyzed. Every gesture would be compared to footage watched billions of times by fans across the world. The pressure would have crushed many performers before filming even began. Yet those who worked closely with Jaafar noticed something unusual. He was not approaching the role as someone trying to imitate a celebrity. He was approaching it as someone attempting to understand a human being hidden behind decades of fame. While the public knew Michael Jackson as a global superstar, Jaafar knew him as family. He had heard stories that never appeared in documentaries. He had witnessed moments that never reached television screens. He understood that behind the dazzling performances and record-breaking success was a man who carried extraordinary burdens. The deeper Jaafar explored Michael's life, the more complicated the challenge became. Because portraying a legend is difficult. Portraying a relative is something else entirely. Every rehearsal forced him to confront memories, expectations, and emotions that most actors never experience. As production moved forward, reports from inside the film set began attracting attention. Crew members described moments that felt almost surreal. Some claimed that watching Jaafar rehearse certain scenes was unsettling because of how closely his movements resembled Michael's natural mannerisms. Others said there were occasions when silence fell across the set because people briefly forgot they were watching an actor. Whether those stories became exaggerated over time hardly mattered. What mattered was the growing sense that something unusual was happening behind the scenes. The anticipation surrounding the film continued to grow. Entertainment journalists speculated about the movie's impact. Fans debated whether any actor could truly handle such responsibility. Critics questioned whether the project could meet the enormous expectations attached to Michael Jackson's legacy. Yet amidst all the discussion, one person remained focused on a different goal. Jaafar was not trying to satisfy headlines. He was trying to honor life. As filming progressed, he immersed himself in thousands of hours of footage, concert performances, interviews, rehearsals, private recordings. Every detail mattered. The way Michael tilted his head before speaking, the subtle movements of his hands during conversations, the quiet moments between performances when the superstar disappeared and the human being emerged. These details became part of a larger puzzle. Piece by piece, Jaafar attempted to reconstruct not just an image but a personality. What many people fail to understand about legendary figures is that fame often transforms them into myths. Over time, stories become larger than reality. Memories become distorted. Public perception replaces complexity. For decades, Michael Jackson existed simultaneously as a man and as a symbol. Different people saw different versions of him. Some saw a musical genius. Some saw a cultural icon. Some saw controversy. Some saw inspiration. But behind all those perceptions was a person whose life contained triumph, pain, ambition, loneliness, determination, and vulnerability. Capturing that reality required more than imitation. It required empathy. As months passed, reports from the production painted a fascinating picture. Directors and producers allegedly became increasingly impressed by Jaffar's commitment. He refused to settle for superficial accuracy. If a dance move appeared effortless on screen, he wanted to understand the countless hours of practice that made it possible. If a smile appeared during a public appearance, he wanted to understand what emotions existed beneath it. This level of dedication gradually transformed the role into something deeply personal. Meanwhile, excitement outside the production continued building. Every leaked image generated headlines. Social media exploded with reactions. Some fans celebrated what they saw as a remarkable casting choice. Others remained skeptical. The debate intensified with every new glimpse of the film. Yet, even those who questioned the project often admitted one thing: Jafar looked astonishingly convincing. The resemblance alone created endless discussion. But appearance was only one part of the challenge. The real test would come when audiences witnessed the emotional heart of the performance. Because Michael Jackson's story is not merely a story about success. It is a story about sacrifice. It is a story about fame. It is a story about a child who became one of the most recognized individuals on earth before fully experiencing a normal childhood. It is a story about artistic genius and relentless pressure. It is a story about dreams achieved at unimaginable cost. Bringing those realities to life demanded emotional honesty. According to people familiar with the production, some scenes proved especially difficult. Not because they involved complicated choreography, not because they required expensive special effects, but because they forced Jafar to confront painful chapters of Michael's life. Moments of isolation, moments of misunderstanding, moments when the weight of fame became impossible to ignore. Those scenes reportedly affected not only the actor but also members of the crew who witnessed them. There were times when filming paused because emotions became overwhelming. There were moments when conversations continued long after cameras stopped rolling. Everyone involved seemed aware that they were participating in something larger than a typical movie production. They were helping tell the story of a cultural phenomenon whose influence continues decades after his greatest achievements. As anticipation grew, the public began wondering how the Jackson family itself viewed the project. After all, nobody understood the significance of Michael's legacy better than those who lived alongside him. Family members had spent years protecting memories, preserving history, and navigating public fascination with one of the most famous names in entertainment. Their support carried enormous meaning. Reports suggested that many relatives viewed Jafar's dedication with admiration. They recognized the immense pressure he faced. More importantly, they recognized the sincerity behind his effort. He was not attempting to exploit a famous name. He was attempting to honor it. That distinction mattered. The closer the film moved toward completion, the more people began discussing its potential impact. Could it introduce Michael Jackson's story to an entirely new generation? Could it reignite appreciation for his artistic achievements? Could it reveal aspects of his life that casual observers never understood? Nobody knew for certain, but one thing became increasingly clear. This was no ordinary biopic. It represented the collision of history, family, music, and memory. For Jaafar Jackson, the journey had already changed him. Months of research, rehearsal, and emotional investment left a permanent mark. He entered the project carrying the weight of expectations. He emerged carrying a deeper understanding of the man behind the legend. And perhaps that understanding became the most important achievement of all. Because legends often appear larger than life. Yet the closer we examine them, the more we discover their humanity. Michael Jackson's story continues to fascinate the world not because he was perfect, but because he was extraordinary. His accomplishments inspired millions. His struggles sparked endless discussion. His influence reshaped music forever. Decades later, people still debate his legacy because true cultural icons never fully disappear. They remain part of the conversation long after their era ends. And now, through the eyes of Jaafar Jackson, a new chapter is preparing to unfold. A chapter that could allow audiences to experience familiar history from a different perspective. A chapter that might blur the line between memory and reality in ways nobody expected. But what happened next during production would shock even those who thought they understood the magnitude of the project. Because one particular moment on set reportedly left veteran crew members speechless, created powerful emotions among members of the Jackson family, and convinced many observers that Jaafar Jackson was experiencing something far deeper than a simple acting performance. The atmosphere on the set changed the moment the cameras prepared to capture one of the most emotionally significant scenes in the entire production. It was not a concert sequence. It was not one of the legendary moonwalk performances that audiences around the world instantly associate with Michael Jackson. It was something far more personal, something hidden behind the spotlight, something that revealed the emotional cost of becoming one of the most famous human beings who ever lived. Those present would later describe the mood as unusually tense, not because anyone doubted the quality of the production, not because technical problems threatened the schedule. The tension came from the realization that everyone involved was about to witness a scene that carried enormous emotional weight. For Jaafar Jackson, the challenge was unlike anything he had experienced throughout the filming process. Throughout months of preparation, he had mastered the choreography. He had studied the voice. He had spent countless hours analyzing interviews, performances, and private footage. Yet none of that could fully prepare him for what was about to happen. The scene focused on a period of Michael Jackson's life when fame had become both a blessing and a burden. A moment when the world saw a superstar standing at the peak of success while privately carrying pressures few people could imagine. As cameras rolled, Jaafar stepped into the scene with complete concentration. Crew members expected another strong performance. They had already seen impressive work throughout production. What happened next, however, reportedly felt different. Witnesses later claimed that something shifted the moment Jaafar began speaking. His posture changed. His expressions became increasingly natural. The performance no longer appeared rehearsed. Instead, it felt deeply personal. Some crew members would later say they stopped watching an actor portray Michael Jackson and started feeling as though they were witnessing fragments of Michael himself. The silence across the set became noticeable. Conversations stopped. Equipment operators remained focused without distraction. Even experienced crew members who had worked on major Hollywood productions found themselves unexpectedly emotional. According to reports circulating among entertainment insiders, the emotional intensity continued building as the scene progressed. The script required Michael to confront feelings of loneliness that often accompanied extraordinary fame. Millions of people recognized his face. Billions knew his name. Yet genuine human connection sometimes became difficult to find. As Jaafar delivered the dialogue, those watching reportedly sensed that he understood those emotions on a deeper level than anyone anticipated. Perhaps it was because he carried the Jackson name himself. Perhaps it was because he had spent months exploring the private side of Michael's life. Whatever the reason, the performance appeared to resonate throughout the entire production. Then came the moment nobody expected. According to multiple accounts connected to the production, the scene reached a point where emotions became overwhelming. The cameras continued rolling. The script moved forward. Yet Jaafar reportedly remained completely immersed in the character. Tears appeared naturally. His voice carried a vulnerability that could not be manufactured through technique alone. For several seconds, the line between performer and subject seemed to disappear. Crew members later described feeling chills. Some allegedly wiped away tears. Others remained frozen in silence. When the director finally called cut, nobody immediately spoke. The room remained quiet. The emotional impact lingered long after the scene ended. What happened next became one of the most talked about stories associated with the production. Several reports suggested that members of the Jackson family who witnessed portions of the filming were deeply moved by what they saw. While many details remain private, stories began circulating that certain relatives struggled to contain their emotions. They were not simply watching an actor perform. They were watching a family member bring another family member back to life through memory, dedication, and extraordinary commitment. For a brief moment, the years seemed to dissipate. The distance between past and present felt smaller. The memories became tangible once again. As word of the incident spread internally, more people working on the project began discussing the unusual atmosphere surrounding Jaafar's performance. Some believed his connection to Michael provided insights unavailable to other actors. Others argued that his dedication alone explained the remarkable results. Whatever the explanation, the stories continued multiplying. Editors reportedly noticed subtle details during playback that impressed even veteran filmmakers. Producers became increasingly confident that audiences would respond emotionally to the final film. Meanwhile, anticipation outside the production reached new levels. Every rumor generated headlines. Every behind-the-scenes report fueled additional curiosity. Fans around the world debated whether the movie could truly capture the essence of Michael Jackson's life. Supporters pointed to Jaafar's commitment as evidence that the project was in capable hands. Skeptics remained cautious but admitted growing interest. The conversation expanded beyond entertainment news and entered mainstream culture. People who rarely discussed biopics suddenly wanted updates. Younger generations who knew Michael primarily through social media clips became curious about the man behind the legend. Older fans who remembered witnessing his rise to global superstardom wondered whether any film could accurately portray such a unique life. The challenge remained enormous. Michael Jackson's story was never simple. It contained extraordinary achievements, unprecedented fame, creative brilliance, personal struggles, and moments of both triumph and heartbreak. Condensing such a life into a single cinematic experience required difficult choices. Yet those involved in the production appeared determined to approach the task with seriousness and respect. As filming entered its later stages, another pattern reportedly emerged. Crew members noticed that Jaafar often remained focused on the role even after cameras stopped rolling. He continued reviewing footage. He continued studying recordings. He continued searching for deeper understanding. The commitment surprised many people. Most actors eventually find ways to separate themselves from demanding roles. In Jaafar's case, that separation reportedly became increasingly difficult. The responsibility felt larger than a normal acting assignment. It felt personal. It felt historical. It felt like carrying a legacy. Months later, when conversations turned toward the film's eventual release, one question continued appearing again and again. Could this performance become the defining moment of Jaafar Jackson's career? Nobody knew the answer, but those who witnessed the production firsthand often shared a similar opinion. Regardless of box office numbers, reviews, or awards, something remarkable had already happened. A young performer had accepted one of the most intimidating roles imaginable and committed himself completely to honoring a figure whose influence transcended generations. And according to those closest to the project, the most powerful moments were still waiting to be revealed. Because as filming approached its final weeks, an even more emotional sequence remained ahead. A sequence connected to one of the most heartbreaking chapters in Michael Jackson's life. A sequence so intense that several people involved would later describe it as the hardest day of production. What happened during that unforgettable day would soon become one of the most astonishing stories ever to emerge from the making of the Michael biopic. As filming entered its final weeks, anticipation across the production reached a level nobody had experienced before. Cast members sensed it. Crew members sensed it. Even visitors who occasionally stepped onto the set could feel that the project was approaching a defining moment. For months, everyone had worked toward recreating the life of one of the most influential entertainers in history. Now they were preparing to film a sequence that many believed would become the emotional centerpiece of the entire movie. Unlike the spectacular concert recreations that showcased Michael Jackson's unmatched talent, this sequence focused on something far more fragile. It explored the emotional burden of carrying a level of fame that few human beings could ever comprehend. The scene required Jaafar Jackson to portray one of the most vulnerable periods in Michael's life, a moment when success, admiration, and global recognition could no longer hide the loneliness that sometimes existed behind the spotlight. According to accounts later shared by individuals familiar with the production, the atmosphere that morning felt unusually heavy. Crew members arrived early. Equipment was prepared with extraordinary care. Conversations remained quieter than usual. Everyone understood that the material they were about to film demanded complete emotional honesty. For Jaafar, the preparation had already begun days earlier. Rather than focusing only on dialogue and camera positions, he reportedly spent significant time revisiting interviews, personal stories, and footage that revealed Michael's emotional state during that chapter of his life. He wanted to understand not just what Michael said publicly, but what he might have felt privately. The challenge was immense because portraying pain is one thing. Portraying the pain of someone the entire world believes it already knows is something entirely different. As the cameras prepared to roll, several people reportedly noticed that Jaafar appeared unusually focused. There was little conversation, little distraction. His attention seemed completely fixed on the scene ahead. The director gathered the cast and crew for final instructions. The set fell silent. Then the cameras began recording. What followed would later become one of the most talked-about moments of the entire production. From the first seconds of the scene, witnesses claimed the performance felt different from anything filmed previously. The emotional intensity was immediate. Every movement appeared natural. Every expression carried weight. There was no sign of an actor attempting to imitate a famous relative. Instead, observers described seeing someone who seemed fully immersed in the emotional reality of the character. The vulnerability felt genuine. The sadness felt genuine. The exhaustion felt genuine. As the scene progressed, the atmosphere reportedly became increasingly emotional. Crew members remained completely silent. Some later admitted they forgot they were working on a movie. They became absorbed in the story unfolding before them. Others described feeling unexpected chills as the performance continued. The emotional truth of the moment appeared to affect nearly everyone present. Then came the sequence that would eventually generate countless discussions behind the scenes. The script called for Michael to confront the emotional consequences of a life lived under constant public scrutiny. Every decision analyzed, every mistake amplified, every personal struggle transformed into international headlines. As Jaafar delivered the scene, witnesses claimed the emotions became overwhelming. Tears reportedly appeared naturally. His voice carried a level of vulnerability that could not be created through technical skill alone. The room remained completely still. Nobody wanted to interrupt what was happening. Several accounts suggest that even experienced industry veterans found themselves deeply affected. Some crew members reportedly